The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday afternoon when Lisa heard the rumble of a motorcycle pulling into the shop. She wiped her greasy hands on her coveralls and looked up from the Honda she was working on. Through the large garage door, she could see a big Harley-Davidson with its rider still sitting on it, rain dripping off his leather jacket. Lisa had been working at Peterson's Auto Repair for 3 years now. At 24, she was the only woman mechanic in the shop, and she had to prove herself every single day. The other guys were okay to work with, but her boss, Mr. Peterson, still treated her like she might break something expensive if he wasn't watching. The motorcycle rider took off his helmet and stepped into the garage. Lisa could see the patches on his leather vest right away. "Hell's Angels." The words were stitched across his back in bold letters, along with other patches that told his story. He was probably in his 50s with gray streaks in his beard and hands that looked like they'd seen plenty of hard work. The other mechanics in the shop suddenly got very busy with whatever they were doing. Tommy found something really interesting under the hood of a pickup truck. Dave decided that organizing his tool drawer couldn't wait another minute. Even old Frank, who usually had something to say about everything, quietly disappeared into the back office. Lisa kept working on the Honda, but she was listening. The biker walked up to the front counter where Mr. Peterson was standing. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a wrench. "Afternoon," the man said. His voice was deep but polite. "Name's Tank. Got a problem with my bike and heard you folks might be able to help." Mr. Peterson looked nervous. He kept glancing around like he was hoping someone else would handle this. "Well, what seems to be the trouble?" Tank gestured toward his motorcycle. "She's a 1978 shovelhead. Been making some weird noises for a couple weeks now. Sounds like the timing might be off, but I'm not sure. Previous guy who worked on her didn't do such a great job." Lisa perked up at that. She'd grown up around motorcycles. Her dad had restored old Harleys in their garage since she was little. She knew that engine sound, and she could already hear what Tank was talking about. Even from where she was standing, she could tell the bike wasn't running right. Mr. Peterson quoted a price that made Tank raise his eyebrows. 2 weeks minimum, Peterson added quickly. "We're pretty backed up right now." Lisa looked around the shop. They had maybe 4 cars total, and none of them were urgent jobs. Peterson was just trying to discourage the customer. She'd seen him do it before when someone came in that he didn't want to deal with. Something about the whole situation bothered her. Here was a guy who clearly loved his motorcycle, asking for help and getting treated badly just because of how he looked. Lisa had dealt with that kind of judgment her whole career. People looked at her and assumed she couldn't possibly know what she was doing with engines. She made a decision that would change everything. "Excuse me," Lisa said, walking over to the counter. Both men turned to look at her. "I couldn't help but overhear. Mind if I take a look at your bike?" Tank seemed surprised but nodded. Mr. Peterson shot her a warning look, but Lisa ignored it. She followed Tank outside to where his Harley was parked. The motorcycle was beautiful even with its problems. The paint job was custom work, deep blue with silver flames. The chrome was polished but showed signs of real use. This wasn't some weekend toy. This was a bike that got ridden hard and loved deeply. "Tell me about the noise," Lisa said, circling around the machine. Tank started the engine, and Lisa listened carefully. There it was, a slight irregularity in the timing, like the engine was trying to remember how to breathe properly. She'd heard that exact sound before. "How long since someone worked on the timing?" she asked. "About 6 months ago. Guy said he fixed it, but it never sounded right after that. Been getting worse lately." Lisa nodded. She had a pretty good idea what was wrong. "Mind if I look under here?" She pointed to the engine case. Tank watched as she examined the engine. Lisa could tell he was testing her, seeing if she actually knew what she was doing. She didn't blame him. Plenty of mechanics had probably promised him fixes and delivered disappointment. After a few minutes, Lisa stood up. "I think I know what's going on. Looks like whoever worked on this before used the wrong timing gear. It's close enough that the engine runs, but not close enough to run right. It's going to get worse if you don't fix it soon." Tank stared at her. "You can tell all that just from looking?" "And listening," Lisa said. "My dad restored these old shovelheads for years. I grew up with this engine sound. Plus, I can see some of the work that was done. Those bolts there? They're not original spec. Wrong thread pitch." For the first time since he'd arrived, Tank smiled. It completely changed his face. "How long would it take you to fix it right?" Lisa thought about it. "If I can get the right parts, maybe 2 days. 3 at most. But I'll need to tear down the timing case and see what else got messed up. Mr. Peterson had followed them outside and was listening to the conversation with growing alarm. Lisa, I don't think we should take on such a complicated job right now. We've got other customers waiting. Lisa knew this was her moment. She could back down, stay safe, keep her boss happy, or she could do what she knew was right. The bike needs help, she said simply. And I can help it. Tank looked between Lisa and Peterson. I'd rather have someone who knows what they're doing than someone who's just going through the motions. How much? Lisa quoted him a fair price. Less than half what Peterson had asked for. Tank nodded immediately. When can you start? Right now, if you want. As they shook hands, Lisa noticed Peterson's expression. He looked like he'd swallowed something sour. But Tank was already pulling out his wallet and the deal was done. That handshake would turn out to be the beginning of everything that came next. Lisa had no idea that fixing one motorcycle would cost her everything she thought she wanted and lead her to everything she actually needed. Sometimes the biggest changes in life start with the smallest acts of courage. Lisa wheeled Tank's Harley into the back corner of the shop where she could work without interruption. The other mechanics gave her plenty of space, which was fine by her. She preferred working alone anyway, especially on something this important. The first thing she did was take pictures of everything. Every bolt, every wire, every connection. Her dad had taught her that rule years ago. Document everything before you touch anything. You never know what the previous person did wrong, and you want to be able to put everything back exactly where it belongs. As she started taking apart the timing case, Lisa's suspicions were confirmed. The previous mechanic had made a mess of things. Wrong bolts, wrong gaskets, and worst of all, a timing gear that was close but not exact. It was like trying to play a piano with keys that were almost the right size, close enough to make noise but never quite right. But as she dug deeper, Lisa found more problems. The oil pump had been reassembled incorrectly. The primary chain was stretched beyond what was safe. Someone had even used regular automotive gasket sealant instead of the high-temperature compound these old engines needed. It was like each repair had been done by someone who didn't really understand what they were working on. Lisa shook her head as she laid out all the parts on a clean workbench. This wasn't just about fixing the timing anymore. This whole engine needed attention, and Tank deserved to know what he was dealing with. She called him that evening after the shop closed. Tank? It's Lisa from the shop. I've got good news and bad news about your bike. Give me the bad news first. The timing gear problem is worse than I thought. Whoever worked on your engine before didn't know what they were doing. They used wrong parts in several places, and some of them are actually dangerous. Your oil pump could fail and that chain could snap. There was silence on the other end of the phone. What's the good news? Tank finally asked. The good news is that I found all the problems and I can fix every one of them. Your bike will run better than it has in years, but it's going to cost more than we originally talked about. Lisa quoted him the new price, including all the parts she'd need to order. It was still fair, but it was a lot more money. Do it, Tank said without hesitation. Do it right. The next morning, Lisa was on the phone with specialty parts suppliers before the shop even opened. She needed original equipment parts, not substitutes. For a 1978 shovelhead, that meant finding suppliers who specialized in vintage Harley parts. Mr. Peterson wasn't happy about all the phone calls and the special orders, but the customer had already paid a deposit. He grumbled about it but left Lisa alone to work. Lisa threw herself into the project with an intensity that surprised even her. She stayed late every night making sure every part was cleaned, inspected, and installed correctly. She found herself thinking about the bike even when she went home. This wasn't just a repair job anymore, it was a restoration. The timing case went back together like a puzzle. Each piece had its exact place, and Lisa made sure everything fit perfectly. She torqued every bolt to specification, used the right sealants, and double-checked her work at every step. When the new oil pump arrived, Lisa installed it with the care of a surgeon. The primary chain got replaced with a new one, properly adjusted and lubricated. Every gasket was new, every seal was perfect. But Lisa didn't stop there. She noticed that the carburetors were dirty and out of adjustment. The spark plugs were old and worn. The air filter was clogged with years of road dirt. If she was going to do this job right, she was going to do it completely right. She rebuilt the carburetors on her own time, staying after work to clean every passage and adjust every setting. She replaced the spark plugs with the exact heat range the engine needed. The air filter got replaced with a high-quality unit that would breathe properly. Tank stopped by on Thursday morning to check on progress. Lisa had told him the bike would be ready that day and she was putting the finishing touches on everything. "Want to hear her run?" Lisa asked. Tank nodded and Lisa hit the starter button. The engine fired immediately and settled into a deep, steady rumble that made both of them smile. It was the sound of a motor that was happy, healthy, and ready for thousands more miles of road. Tank listened to the engine for several minutes, his experienced ear picking up every nuance of the sound. He revved it gently, feeling the smooth response of the throttle. The irregular timing noise was completely gone, replaced by the steady heartbeat of a properly tuned Harley. "This sounds better than it did when I bought it 10 years ago, Tank said, genuine amazement in his voice. Lisa shut off the engine and started explaining everything she'd found and fixed. She showed him the old parts, pointed out the mistakes the previous mechanic had made, and walked him through every repair she'd performed. Tank examined every detail of her work. He looked at the timing case, checked the oil pump installation, and tested the primary chain tension. Lisa watched nervously as he inspected everything, but she was confident in her work. "How did you know to check all this other stuff?" Tank asked. "Most mechanics would have just fixed the timing and called it good." "Because it's your bike," Lisa said simply. "You ride it every day. You depend on it. If I'm going to put my name on this work, I want to make sure you're not going to have problems down the road." Tank pulled out his wallet and paid the full amount without question. Then he added a tip that was almost as much as the labor cost. "This is more than we agreed on," Lisa protested. "No," Tank said, shaking his head. "This is exactly what work like this is worth. Most people don't understand the difference between fixing something and doing it right. You did it right." As Tank prepared to leave, he paused and looked at Lisa seriously. "You know, I've been riding for 30 years, had my bikes worked on by dozens of mechanics. Most of them were okay. A few were terrible, but very few actually cared about the work the way you do. That's rare." He climbed onto his bike and started it up again, listening to the perfect engine sound with satisfaction. "If you ever decide you want to work somewhere that appreciates talent like yours, give me a call." Tank handed her a business card and rode away, his Harley sounding better than it had in years. Lisa stood in the garage, holding the card and listening to the sound of the bike fading into the distance. She had no idea that this moment of professional satisfaction was about to turn into the biggest challenge of her career. Sometimes doing your best work creates the biggest problems. Lisa came into work Monday morning feeling good about the week ahead. Tank's Harley repair had gone perfectly, and she was excited to tackle the next challenge. She had no idea that Mr. Peterson had spent his entire weekend getting phone calls. The first call came Saturday afternoon. Mrs. Henderson from the flower shop next door wanted to know why there were motorcycle gang members hanging around Peterson's shop. She'd seen Tank picking up his bike and was concerned about the neighborhood. The second call came from Councilman Bradley, who mentioned that several business owners had called him about Peterson's shop attracting the wrong kind of clientele. Bradley suggested that Peterson might want to reconsider the types of customers he serves. By Sunday evening, Peterson had received 6 more calls. The bank president, the insurance agent, even the pastor from the church across the street, all of them expressing concern about HELLS Angels members being seen at his shop. Peterson had built his business on being respectable. His customer base was mostly families, local business owners, and retirees who brought their cars in for regular maintenance. He prided himself on running a clean, professional establishment that parents felt comfortable dropping their cars off at. Now people were questioning that reputation, and it was all because Lisa had fixed one motorcycle. Monday morning, Peterson called Lisa into his office before she even had a chance to start work. "Sit down. Lisa, we need to talk." Lisa could tell something was wrong by his tone. Peterson looked tired, like he hadn't slept well. "Is everything okay, Mr. Peterson?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out. I spent my weekend fielding phone calls about your motorcycle customer on Thursday." Lisa felt her stomach drop. "What kind of phone calls?" "The kind that question whether this shop is the right place for families to bring their vehicles. The kind that make people wonder if we're getting involved with dangerous people." "Dangerous people?" Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. Tank was polite, he paid his bill, and he didn't cause any trouble. "What's dangerous about that?" Peterson rubbed his forehead. "Lisa, you have to understand. This is a small town. People talk. When they see Hell's Angels patches in my shop, they start wondering what kind of business I'm really running. The kind that fixes motorcycles when they're broken, Lisa said. Just like we fix cars when they're broken. It's not that simple, and you know it. Lisa stood up, her frustration building. No, Mr. Peterson, I don't know it. What I know is that a customer came in with a legitimate problem. I fixed it properly, and he paid us good money for quality work. What exactly is the problem with that? Peterson sighed. The problem is that you took on a major repair without proper supervision. The problem is that you made decisions about pricing and timeline without consulting me. The problem is that you put this shop's reputation at risk. I put our reputation at risk by doing excellent work. You put our reputation at risk by getting too cozy with motorcycle club members. The words hung in the air between them. Lisa realized that this conversation wasn't really about procedures or supervision. It was about fear and prejudice, plain and simple. Mr. Peterson, Tank was just a customer, a paying customer who needed help with his motorcycle. I treated him exactly the same way I treat every other customer. That's the problem, Lisa. You can't treat everyone the same way in this business. Some customers come with complications that others don't. Lisa felt her anger rising. What complications? He was polite, he knew what he was talking about, and he appreciated good work. Those are the best kind of complications to have. Peterson stood up behind his desk. Lisa, I've made my decision. This isn't working out. I'm going to have to let you go. The words hit Lisa like a physical blow. You're firing me? I'm terminating your employment, effective immediately. Because I fixed a motorcycle? Because you showed poor judgment and put this business at risk. Lisa stared at him in disbelief. 3 years of proving herself. 3 years of excellent work. 3 years of dealing with customers who questioned whether a woman could really fix their cars. All of it erased because she'd helped someone who wore the wrong kind of jacket. This is unbelievable. You're firing me for doing my job well. I'm firing you for not following proper procedures and for making decisions that weren't yours to make. Lisa laughed bitterly. Proper procedures? Like charging fair prices and doing quality work? Like treating customers with respect regardless of what they look like? Like consulting your supervisor before taking on major repairs? Like considering the impact your decisions have on the entire business? You mean like considering what the neighbors might think if we help the wrong kind of people? Peterson's face reddened. That's enough, Lisa. Clean out your tools and turn in your keys. Lisa looked around the office at the certificates on the wall and the photos of the shop's early days. She'd been proud to work here. She'd thought she was building something. What about my current projects? The Honda I was working on? Mrs. Garcia's transmission? Tommy can finish those up. Tommy doesn't know transmissions like I do. Tommy will figure it out. Lisa shook her head. Even now, even as he was firing her, Peterson was willing to give customers inferior service just to avoid admitting that she was better at some things than the men he employed. Fine, I'll pack my tools. Lisa walked back into the shop where Tommy and Dave were pretending to work while obviously listening to every word from the office. They both looked embarrassed when she appeared. Sorry, Lisa, Tommy said quietly. This is messed up. Yeah, this ain't right, Dave added. You did good work on that bike. Lisa appreciated their support, but it didn't change anything. She started loading her tools into her rolling toolbox, 3 years' worth of wrenches and gauges and specialty equipment that she'd collected piece by piece. The other mechanics watched silently as she packed everything up. Frank, the oldest mechanic in the shop, shook his head in disgust but didn't say anything. They all knew this was wrong, but they also knew that speaking up might cost them their own jobs. It took Lisa 2 hours to pack everything. 3 years of work life fit into the back of her pickup truck. As she loaded the last toolbox, Peterson came out of his office. Lisa, I want you to know this isn't personal. It's just business. Lisa looked at him for a long moment. No, Mr. Peterson. Business would be keeping your best mechanic and telling the gossips to mind their own affairs. This is personal. This is about being afraid of what people might think if you treat everyone fairly. She climbed into her truck and started the engine. As she drove away from Peterson's auto repair for the last time, Lisa wondered if she'd made the biggest mistake of her career by standing up for what was right. But sometimes the biggest mistakes turn out to be the best. Decisions you never knew you were making. 2 weeks after losing her job, Lisa was starting to panic. She'd applied at every auto shop within 50 miles, but word traveled fast in the small automotive community. Some places were polite but said they weren't hiring. Others were more direct about not wanting the complications that might come with employing her. She was sitting at her kitchen table, circling job listings in newspapers from bigger cities, when she heard the familiar rumble of a Harley pulling into her driveway. Lisa looked out the window and saw Tank climbing off his motorcycle. Her first thought was that something was wrong with the bike. Her stomach dropped at the idea that her perfect repair job had failed somehow. She opened the door before Tank even had a chance to knock. "Is everything okay with the bike?" she asked immediately. Tank smiled and held up his hands. "The bike's perfect. Runs like a dream. That's actually why I'm here." Lisa relaxed a little but was still confused. "I don't understand. Can we talk? I've got something I want to run by you." Lisa invited him in and made coffee while Tank settled into her small living room. He looked around at the motorcycle magazines on her coffee table and the vintage Harley parts she was restoring for her dad. "Nice work on that carburetor," Tank said, nodding toward a disassembled linkered carb on her workbench. "Just a hobby project. My dad's got a 1948 panhead that needs some attention." Tank picked up one of the carburetor pieces and examined it. "This is museum-quality restoration work. Where'd you learn to do this?" "My dad taught me when I was a kid. We used to spend weekends in the garage, bringing old bikes back to life. I learned as much about motorcycles as I did about cars." Tank set the part down carefully. "That's what I figured. Lisa, I've got a proposition for you." "What kind of proposition?" "You know I mentioned that if you ever wanted to work somewhere that appreciated real talent, you should call me?" Lisa nodded. "Well, my brother-in-law owns a custom motorcycle shop about an hour from here, place called Chrome and Steel Customs. He specializes in high-end restoration work and custom builds, the kind of stuff that wealthy collectors pay serious money for." Lisa felt a flutter of interest but tried not to get her hopes up. "Okay. Mike's been looking for a master mechanic for months. Someone who can handle vintage restorations and custom work. Someone who understands that when a customer pays $20,000 for a bike restoration, they expect perfection." $20,000? Lisa couldn't hide her surprise. Tank laughed. "That's on the low end. Last month they delivered a complete frame-up restoration of a 1938 Knucklehead. Customer paid $45,000 for that job." Lisa tried to wrap her head around those numbers. At Peterson's shop, their biggest job might be a transmission rebuild for $1,500. "What does this have to do with me?" "I told Mike about the work you did on my bike. Showed him the pictures I took of your repair job. He was impressed. Very impressed." Tank pulled out his phone and showed Lisa some photos. "This is Mike's shop." Lisa looked at the pictures and couldn't believe what she was seeing. The facility was huge, with specialized lifts, every tool imaginable, and work areas that looked more like surgical suites than garage bays. Vintage motorcycles in various stages of restoration filled the space. "This looks like motorcycle heaven," Lisa said. "It is. And Mike wants to offer you a job." Lisa stared at Tank. "He wants to offer me a job?" "He's never even met me. He doesn't need to meet you. Your work speaks for itself, but there are some things you need to know before you decide." "What kinds of things?" Tank leaned forward. "First, the pay. Mike's willing to start you at twice what Peterson was paying you, plus commission on restoration jobs you complete. Good mechanics can make 6 figures a year there." Lisa's eyes widened. 6 figures? Easy. But here's the thing. A lot of Mike's customers are motorcycle club members. Collectors who've been riding for decades. People with serious money who want serious work done on serious machines. You'd be working on bikes owned by Hells Angels, Outlaws, Mongols, and other clubs. Lisa thought about that. Is that supposed to scare me? It scares some people. These aren't weekend warriors riding Sportsters to Starbucks. These are real bikers with real money who demand real results. They don't care if you're a woman, but they absolutely care if you screw up their bikes. And if I don't screw up their bikes? Tank grinned. Then you'll have more work than you can handle, and customers who respect excellence above everything else. In that world, skill matters more than anything. If you can do the work, nothing else matters. Lisa considered this. At Peterson's shop, she'd constantly had to prove that she belonged there. Customers would ask to speak to the real mechanic when she gave them estimates. They'd question her diagnoses and ask for second opinions from the men. What's the catch? Lisa asked. No catch, really. But you need to be comfortable working in an environment where your customers might look intimidating to outsiders. You need to be okay with the fact that some people in town might not approve of where you work. Lisa almost laughed. I think I've already dealt with that problem. That's what I figured. Mike knows what happened at Peterson's. Word gets around in the motorcycle community. A lot of people think Peterson's an idiot for letting you go. Tank finished his coffee and stood up. Look, I'm not going to pressure you, but Mike wants to meet you this week if you're interested. He's got 3 vintage restorations starting next month, and he needs someone who can handle the detail work. Lisa thought about her dwindling savings account and the stack of rejection letters on her table. Then she thought about those pictures of the custom shop, and the idea of working on motorcycles that cost more than most people's cars. What kind of vintage restorations? Tank smiled. A 1947 Knucklehead, a 1936 VL, and a 1941 WLA military bike. Customer wants the Knucklehead done for a show in 6 months. Concours level restoration. Everything original or authentically reproduced. Lisa felt her heart racing. Those were dream projects, the kind of work that most mechanics never got to touch. When does Mike want to meet? How about tomorrow? I can ride over with you, introduce you to the crew, show you around the facility. Lisa looked around her small apartment, at the bills stacking up and the uncertain future stretching ahead of her. Then she thought about Peterson's reason for firing her, and how wrong it felt to be punished for doing excellent work. Okay, she said. Let's do it. Tank shook her hand. Fair warning. Once you see that place, you're never going to want to work on regular cars again. As Tank rode away, Lisa realized that getting fired might have been the best thing that ever happened to her career. Sometimes life has to push you out of your comfort zone before you realize how much bigger your world could be. 6 months later, Lisa stood back and admired the 1947 Knucklehead she'd just finished. Every piece of chrome gleamed like jewelry. The paint was so deep and flawless it looked like you could dive into it. After 4 months of meticulous work, the motorcycle was ready for its owner. Chrome and steel customs had turned out to be everything Tank had promised and more. The shop was like a playground for serious mechanics with tools and equipment that Lisa had only dreamed about. But more importantly, the attitude was completely different from Peterson's place. Here, nobody questioned whether Lisa belonged. Mike Rodriguez, the owner, cared about exactly one thing. Could you do the work? When Lisa had walked him through her restoration plan for the Knucklehead, showing him original parts catalogs and explaining her approach to every detail, Mike had hired her on the spot. The other mechanics in the shop were older guys with decades of experience, and they'd welcomed Lisa as soon as they saw her work. There was no ego, no competition, just professionals who respected skill and shared knowledge freely. Lisa's first week had been overwhelming in the best possible way. She'd worked on bikes worth more than most people's houses. A 1938 Knucklehead that belonged to a collector in California, a custom chopper with a S&S engine that made more horsepower than most sports cars, a pristine 1971 Sportster that needed nothing more than a tune-up, but got treated like a priceless antique anyway. The customers were different too. Tank had been right about them looking intimidating to outsiders, but Lisa quickly learned that serious bikers were some of the most particular customers she'd ever worked with. They knew their machines inside and out. They asked intelligent questions, and they paid well for quality work. Her first big test had come with a HELLS Angels member who brought in a 1965 Electra Glide that had been damaged in an accident. The bike had sentimental value. It had belonged to his father, and he wanted it restored exactly as it had been originally. Lisa had spent 2 weeks researching original specifications, tracking down period-correct parts and documenting every detail of the restoration. When she fired up the engine for the first time, the customer had tears in his eyes. "Sounds exactly like I remember," he'd said, his voice rough with emotion. My old man would be proud. Word spread quickly in the motorcycle community. Lisa found herself working on bikes from all over the region. Collectors who had heard about her attention to detail started calling the shop specifically to request her services. The Knucklehead project had been her masterpiece so far. The customer was a businessman from the city who collected vintage Harleys. He'd brought the bike in as a basket case, just a frame and boxes of parts, some original and some not. Lisa had spent the first month just cataloging everything and researching what was missing. She'd tracked down original parts from dealers across the country, had some pieces rebuilt by specialists, and fabricated exact reproductions for the parts that couldn't be found. Every bolt was correct for the year. Every piece of trim was authentic. The paint job was done in the original color scheme using period-appropriate techniques. When the customer came to pick up the bike, he'd walked around it 3 times without saying a word. "This is better than factory new," he'd finally said. "This is what this bike was meant to be." The customer had paid the full $40,000 bill without blinking and left a tip that covered Lisa's rent for 2 months. But more importantly, he'd taken pictures and posted them on vintage motorcycle forums online. Within a week, Lisa had 3 more restoration requests. Mike had made her lead restoration specialist after just 4 months. Her salary had doubled again, and with the commission from high-end jobs, Lisa was making more money than she'd ever imagined possible. But the best part wasn't the money. It was the respect. Customers came to the shop asking for Lisa by name. Other mechanics called to consult with her on difficult problems. Motorcycle magazines had featured 2 of her restorations, and she'd been invited to judge a concours show. The irony of her situation wasn't lost on Lisa when Peterson showed up at the shop one Thursday afternoon. His own business had been struggling since losing several customers who'd heard about how he'd treated her. Word had gotten around that Peterson's auto repair wasn't the place to go if you wanted your best mechanics. Lisa was working on a custom build when Peterson walked in, a modern Harley with a vintage style makeover that would cost the customer $60,000 when finished. She looked up from the intricate metalwork she was doing and saw her former boss standing awkwardly by the front counter. "Hello, Mr. Peterson," Lisa said politely, not stopping her work. "Lisa, I was hoping we could talk." "About what?" Peterson looked around the shop, taking in the high-end equipment and the obviously expensive motorcycles under construction. "I wanted to apologize for how things ended, and I wanted to ask if you might consider coming back to work for me." Lisa set down her tools and looked at him. "Coming back? Business has been tough lately. I could really use someone with your skills. I'd be willing to give you a raise, maybe even make you shop foreman." Lisa almost smiled. "What kind of raise?" Peterson named a figure that was less than half what Lisa now made in a week. "That's generous, Mr. Peterson, but I'm happy where I am." "Lisa, be realistic. This motorcycle stuff is fine as a hobby, but you need steady work. Regular customers. This place is too specialized to be reliable long-term." Lisa gestured around the shop. "You see that panhead over there? That's a complete frame-up restoration for a collector in Texas. $45,000. The shovel head next to it, custom build for a businessman in Chicago. $60,000. That bike I'm working on right now, $75,000 when it's finished." Peterson stared at her. $75,000? For a motorcycle? For a perfect motorcycle. For craftsmanship that most people can't even imagine. For work that will still be appreciated 50 years from now. Lisa picked up her tools and went back to work. "Mr. Peterson, I appreciate the offer, but I'm building something here. I'm not just fixing machines, I'm creating art. These customers don't just want their bikes to run. They want them to be perfect." Peterson watched her work for a moment, seeing the precision and care that went into every movement. "I guess I underestimated what you were capable of." "Yes, you did. And when you had the chance to learn from that mistake, you chose to fire me instead." Peterson left without another word, and Lisa went back to her metalwork. Through the window, she could see Tank in the parking lot working on his own bike. He caught her eye and gave her a thumbs up. 6 months ago, Lisa had thought her career was over. She'd been devastated by the loss of her job and terrified about her future. Now she realized that getting fired had been the push she needed to find where she really belonged. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find everything you actually needed. As Lisa put the finishing touches on her latest masterpiece, she knew she'd found her calling. She wasn't just a mechanic anymore. She was an artist whose canvas happened to have 2 wheels and an engine.